This is an SM Media production.
Hi folks, and welcome to the latest episode of Chronicle, the Rangers journey, right here on SM Media. I'm Scott McPike. It's an absolute pleasure to be your host on this show as always. We are now at the stage in the summer of 2003. We're going to talk about the second half of the reign of Alex McLeish as Rangers manager. A period that is as up and down as you can get. There's real highs, obviously a famous day involving a helicopter, but there is some real lows in that period as well. To join me in this part of the journey, I'm delighted to welcome from the Ibrox channel podcast, Andrew Simpson. Andrew, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. It's always good to talk about Rangers with like-minded people. So, yeah, going to enjoy it.
It's going to be an interesting one because I don't think we've done a show like this on the channel that is up, down, is down, up, then down again as this one. It's got everything in it. Every emotion I think you feel in this whole journey, I think, can be summarised in one episode here.
Oh, it's crazy, wasn't it? I've never seen a seesaw like that, really, have you?
No, you haven't. And that's the problem with this thing is that you're coming off a momentous season, 5 out of 6 trophies under Alex McLeish. It should have been rosy. We spoke about it in the last episode that the hanging situation and the finances are becoming clear. Rangers are not in a good place off the park, and coming off a domestic treble, what was the feeling at the time? Was the finances in the back of your mind, like desperate to get out, but it was more a case of where Rangers are winning on the park, let's just ignore what's going on here? And I think a lot of fans did, maybe not with the benefit of hindsight, because this is, I mean, doing the research and a thing like this, you go back and look at old newspaper articles and the numbers were there as plain as day. And
yeah,
is it a case of, and what I think at the time, I mean, I was only 7-8-year-old at the time, so I wasn't up to date with the financial situation. But when you're looking at numbers at like 62 million for a bank debt for a Scottish football club, how are you going to trade out of that?
well, that's the thing, isn't it? Especially like you say, coming off the back of winning the treble, Lenzo Amoruso bowed out with, scoring the winning goal in the Scottish Cup final. Everything looked rosy in the garden, didn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I was around 15, 16 at the time when coming into this season. It was back in the day, when you used to buy the Rangers news and you'd
Yeah.
always be really into it. I remember going to they did like a training day at Ibrox, and you got this little fact and figures brochure, I'm sure. And there was just this bit at the bottom, which just was like, it just showed the kind of debt and stuff. And really, when you're that age, you don't really take it in, but you go, oh, that's a lot. But I think, like you say, a lot of people did bury their head in the sand and go, we'll be fine. We're Rangers. But looking at them finances, even now, in football, that's a lot of money, especially for then when we would only pay around about $1 million for a transfer if it was a decent transfer, wouldn't we? So,
and it's
yeah.
the massively reduced incoming levels as well. You don't have that TV deal. This is the time the BBC deal was half of what the Sky deal is. You've got the English clubs dwarfing Rangers now in terms of wages and things like that. Like the income's so low, but again the expenditure's so high. And basically, David Murray had decided he didn't want to be associated with Costcutting. We spoke about that last week in depth. John McLeish was in as chairman, and he had to make some big decisions. And I think John McLeish gets an unfair rap. I don't think he had done anything to save Rangers, but I think he certainly kind of stopped the pain for a wee while because he had to come in and make drastic cuts. And obviously, on the park was probably the first. The wage bill at this point is ridiculously high. Rangers, though, they had to make some big decisions, and we'll start with a few players that had to leave, basically. Arthur Newman, obviously the first signing of that Advocat era. He was offered a new contract, but it was 80% less of his previous terms. Now, the fact that Newman retired suggests to me that I think Newman would have probably stayed if he'd get some form. I think he would have took a cut, but 80%, you're not asking anybody to take an 80% wage cut and expecting them to say that was. And it's a lack of loyalty as well, because you've got Amoruso's another one, McCann, we'll touch on Ferguson in a wee second, but you've got these players who have been so successful for Rangers, and you're basically saying, we're forgetting about loyalty, we're giving you reduced terms, just hope you take it. Where's the loyalty there?
Yeah, no, I agree. It's a frustrating one, isn't it, when you look at football sometimes, because in a sense, for footballers, even though there is loyalty to a degree, it is a job, isn't it? And I think if anybody in any job, especially after winning a treble where you've had a decent season, you've met, so to speak, your KPIs, your targets, and you're told, oh, you can stay, but 80% less, I know they probably were privy to a bit more information in regards to the financial situation, but I imagine a lot of agents probably would have said, no, maybe you can get a better deal somewhere else. Like you say with Newman, he just retired after that, didn't he? He was only, what, 33, was it?
33, yeah. Canadian obviously got offered crazy money to go to Qatar. Amoruso one's interesting because Amoruso was desperate to stay. I think that was the reason he was still there. He was obviously advocate was trying to push him out the door. I think he developed a really good relationship with Alex McLeish, but to the point that when McLeish and Amoruso were talking about the contract renewal that was obviously going to be significantly less wages, McLeish took off his manager hat and went, as a friend, take the deal from Blackburn. Do you know what I mean? Like that.
Yeah.
It's sad because you look at these players and you think of a really successful time, but as well as that, you're asking players to take such a significant cut. And even the manager, who I imagine would be desperate to keep Lorenzo Amoruso, especially after who he brings in. And he's telling him to take a better deal because of a friendship he's got. It's not about that's you're asking people to choose between money and like their futures. There's only one winner. You have to think of the long term, not the situation at the club.
Yeah, you could see how Amoruso felt in that Scottish Cup final v Dundee. Absolute streaming tears at the end of the game. We haven't really seen a defender like him in that respect. It was sad, and of course, at the time it was Blackburn Rangers, wasn't it? With which players heading down there. But yeah, I guess that was one of the big symbols of the change that was happening at the club. We were kind of leaving that 90s period where we had 9 in a row, where we had, just success after success. And, at this point as well, that is, them across the other end of the city had spent a lot of money in, trying to level up with Murray's, kind of for every £5 they'll spend, we'll spend 10. And, it was looking worrying in some respects. But going into this season, I was pretty confident, being 15, 16, I thought, we got a crack at the Champions League, hopefully we can get there. Because Europe was something we would just couldn't really do much with over the past couple of years there, could we? But yeah, losing Amoruso was a big one. That was a sad one.
Yeah, and obviously the big saga of the summer was the Barry Ferguson situation.
Oh, yeah.
Ferguson's performances in the last 18 months, I mean, he deserves that opportunity to go to the Premier League, but Blackburn. Now, I know the Souness factor, which I've heard people say, like, he wanted to work with Souness, and fair enough, but the problem with this is that Ferguson had that loyalty thing as well. Ferguson felt he was getting shoved out the door, which he was. Murray was desperate to get the money in. Now, the problem with this one is Barry Ferguson was a super player in that 18 months. That 18 months since McLeish came in, he took hold of that team. He was unbelievable. Drove Rangers forward. He was so impressive in those 18 months. But the problem you've got with this is that for £8.5 million, yes, it's a good transfer fee, but David Murray's shoving him out the door. That's the loyalty thing I spoke about with Newman and Amoruso. You're looking at this team and thinking that, like, there's so many players in there who deserve loyalty, who deserve a swan song. Ferguson's only 25 at this point.
Yeah,
Barry Ferguson should be, and I'm not Barry Ferguson does a lot of things wrong later on in life, but at this point, Barry Ferguson should not be getting shoved out the door. It should either be a bidding war, or Barry Ferguson should not be handing in a transfer request. And if that was the problem, there was no loyalty there. It was just about get the money in, And David Murray's not even involved in the club at this point. He's an honorary chairman. He's obviously making decisions, but he's shoving his captain out the door to get money in. That shows you how bleak this situation is, even then.
Yeah, Ferguson, we look back at that 02-03 season, and the amount of goals he was banging in just about every other game for a midfielder was just astronomical. He was the heartbeat of the team. And, he was, for such a young age as well, being a captain, he was just brilliant. He was a great all-round player. And you're correct in what you're saying, there should have been a bidding war for him, but it was the whole summer it raged on for Ferguson's going, is he not going? He's not happy. And then that was it, gone. And it's like you rip out, especially you lost Amoruso, you've lost the captain now. So obviously it was Craig Moore stepped up to be captain, who was missing most of the season with injury, I think, in and out. That didn't help either. But when you lose somebody of that age, at the peak of their footballing ability, you've got to have an adequate replacement lined up, and we just wanted in that situation to do that.
Yeah, and when you look at the players leaving, Newman, Amoruso, McCann, Ferguson, the players that come in, and no disrespect to them, Nuno Capuccio, Emerson, Paulo Vanoli, Egolost instead. Now, the big difference there is that Barry Ferguson's at his peak of his career. Amoruso and Newman were getting to the kind of later stages of their career, but they still had enough in them to show. They'd showed it the season before that they could still do it. There's a reason you're getting Emerson, Paulo Vanoli, Egolost instead in free transfers and Nuno Capuccio for 700,000. Now, really good players back in their day, they are past it. And it's this raking around the bargain bin that Alex McLeish would become famous for, unfairly, because he couldn't help the situation he was dealt. But how do you go from that to that in the space of a summer? Do you know what I mean? And I know cost cutting and things like that, and fair enough, but you can't expect the same results on the park. You just can't.
I totally agree. I think we brought in around 11 players that summer as well, and we only spent just under $1 million on that. So we really were raiding. We were looking at clubs. We're getting, I think, because Namucci came in.
Namucci, Gavin Ray
from France. Yeah, Gavin Ray for Dundee, wasn't it? Yeah. Who actually did have something about him. But
Gavin Ray's a good player, right? And a really nice guy, lovely guy. But replacing Barry Ferguson with Gavin Ray, no disrespect, it's just not the same, and it's a shame. It's just bad. It's just bad, and it just speaks of how bad this situation is. Like, what?
I remember when I heard we were signing Emerson, I went, really? Didn't realise it wasn't that Emerson, but it was. It was. Don't get me wrong, still pretty confident. You think, new team getting put together. We'll see what we can do, because over the other end of the city, they did look a bit like they were not necessarily aging, but they had been together a few seasons. Obviously they still had Larson, who, we didn't have anything to match that, really, did we? But yeah, you look at the players we lost that summer, and bar Barry Ferguson, I think we only got about, was it 1.5 for Neil McCann, 1.4 for Amoruso, and then everything else was just, there was either no fee or just there's nothing available. So it's not as if we even raked a lot of money back, bar Ferguson, especially with the situation at the time, really, wasn't it? Scary times in hindsight, very scary times, especially when we knew what happened. And
this season as a whole is probably the season we'll spend the least amount of time on in this series, because there is nothing that happens that's any note. They obviously qualify for Champions League, a big win over Stuttgart, but it just becomes a disaster after that. It's just a horrible season, and there's just so many bad results. The only really decent thing is probably the signing of Frank de Boer. It was obviously a swan song. Like, Ronald de Boer was leaving, Moles was leaving. It was kind of Frank. It was always a thing, when was Frank coming, when Ronald was there. It was only kind of high point of that season, wasn't it? And he was obviously still a really good player, but
we did start the season quite well, a few thrashings, and then it wasn't until the Old Firm game where we lost 1-0 to I always remember it as Hartson scoring, but actually looking back, it's gone down as an OG deflection.
It comes off
and just after that, anytime we did win a game, it was 1-0, 2-1. We looked very flat. There was no inspiration. Don't get me wrong, we started the Champions League fairly well. I remember Panathinaikos. I remember we were winning until the last few minutes. Then obviously we got the draw, which is still a great result, in the Champions League. But then it was really downhill after the Stuttgart win, which put us in a good position. We just went off a cliff. We played well against Man U. I always remember the Battle of Britain. I remember buying a flag that year.
Yeah, I've
The
got
champion.
I've got a weird story about that game. Actually.
Oh, have you? Go
Both
for it.
games, yeah. Well, the first game, if you seem to remember, it was the first game's at Ibrox. Phil Neville scored. Right. There was
Phil Neville out of everyone. Yeah.
There was a load of casuals coming down, and one of them come up to me, and I'll not say what he said, but it was reported the next day they were from Manchester with broad Aberdeen accents. And I always found that fascinating. But the second leg, we went down to Old Trafford, and I was a Man United member at the time. My mum loved the Trafford Centre, so we went down to. We used to go. I'm not a Man United fan, but I used to love going down to Old Trafford, and my mum would obviously go shopping. Me and my dad would go to a game. We ended up getting tickets for the away leg.
Oh, nice.
And the Man United end, right? And obviously I had to pretend. But there was a fascinating. There was a woman asked me from the seat below. I was only about 6 or 7, and she says, "Are you getting tucked into your Fred the Red bedspread tonight?" My bedroom at the time is as Rangers as you can get. And it's just that weird thing of like, you look back, that's my memories of that, because that was the only time I think I've ever seen Cristiano Ronaldo live, and it was very raw at that point. And you just look at memories like that, and you just remember how poor Rangers were that night. Man United, that isn't a vintage Man United team, but Man United just wiped the floor with Rangers that night.
I think, actually, from what I remember of the game, so I remember watching it on the telly, I think there was one chance for Lovenkrands, and it was wide. I think that was it. We were outclassed, everything. Obviously saw Walter Smith. I remember watching the opening, because I used to record the games on. I had a DVD recorder then, which is mad. I used to record the games, and I just always remember seeing Walter Smith with Fergie, which was quite nice to see. But Ronaldo. It wasn't the finished article there, but all I remember in that game, he was just so fast. It was all about him and his stepovers, wasn't it? But it was unfortunate. We just weren't up to that. We weren't up to their standards, and it was all downhill from there. It was great to get into the Champions League because we took it for granted sometimes a little bit, I think, and especially I think both clubs were in the Champions League as well in Scotland, which kind of made it. Yeah. And you just don't really see that either. But that season it was just such a frustrating one. There was just nothing. It was the whitewashes with the Old Firm games. They were just so frustrating. It was just, you just knew you were in for a hiding. I always remember the last game was at Celtic Park, and we were holding on. It was 0-0. But actually we were kind of in the game. We looked fairly strong. But then last minute, Sutton. And it was just, that summed up our whole season, in double digits behind them. And it was just atrocious.
It was atrocious. It was an atrocious season. Rangers finished second. No cups, out in the semi-final of the League Cup to Hibs in penalties.
I remember watching that on Channel 5. I used to show that on Channel 5. I just remember going, it was Livy in the final. Just beat Hibs.
Yeah, that's right,
It's Livy. Just beat them. Nope, we couldn't even do that. Couldn't even that was almost, it felt like a guaranteed cup. Nope, didn't happen. Just
a disastrous season. Stephen Dobby, if you're going back to Horn Rangers. But the summer of 2004, obviously we spoke about Moles and De Boer leaving as well, 2 legends who I think it's not been said enough just how important they were to that Rangers team. But Rangers sell Mikel Arteta. Now, I am never have been a good negotiator, but you sign a player like Mikel Arteta for £6.5 million. Now, Andrew, is it fair to say that Mikel Arteta improved in his 3 years at Ibrox?
Yeah, definitely. Right. Obviously, the 03-04 was a bit of a write-off, but that you couldn't put that down to one player. But he was fantastic. I always remember his debut against Celtic. Obviously, it was a bit of a lucky goal, but he loved it. He really got in with the atmosphere. It was a bit weird over that transfer, I'll be honest. I always remember the whole pick and going back to, was it Sociedad he went to? And then 6 months later, was it Everton? He came over to England, so it was a bit of a weird one. But £6 million, that's a hell of an outlay for a club like us.
You sell him for £3 million now. He claimed he was homesick, and as you've just pointed out, he goes to Sociedad, and 6 months later he goes to Everton, so he's not really homesick. But But sign a player for £6 million from Barcelona to sell for £3 million 2 years after him improving at such a good rate. If you want a phrase, Martin Bain is negotiating the contracts at the club at that point. If you want a situation of how desperate the club are for money, this is it. This is the worst negotiating I think I've ever seen from Rangers Football Club. How is that possible? How do you... A pedigree like Barcelona, had played for PSG, had improved as a player. Now, he was worth more than £6 million. How do you settle for £3 million? How's that allowed?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think from the late 90s onwards, through Murray's kind of, I know obviously Murray was kind of in and out at this point, but through those periods, we were never good at selling players. You know, especially the outlay, we would always spend, you know, obviously famously back in, was it 01 when we spent 12 million on Torandre Flo. We would never, you know, Ross Wilson would have an aneurysm now, I think, if he saw the way that they were operating. You know, we did not have that kind of structure in place. Yes, we invested in Auchenhowie Murray Park then to try and get kids through the system. I always remember as well, there was the TV show, do you remember Blue Heaven?
Yeah.
Which they had on the telly, but there was never anything to reap. So it's not as if we were making money in other areas. We just weren't, and we weren't selling. You probably look at 3 million back then for a player sounds good, but no, not when you've spent 6 million on them. No, it was plugging gaps that were getting bigger, essentially.
It was just weird and just bad negotiating. But Bain will come up later on because I think he deserves a couple of minutes in this type of show. But Rangers obviously went into that summer. They didn't spend a fortune, but they obviously brought a few players in. They spent $500,000 in Nacho Novo. I've said before, I think that's one of the best value for money signings in Rangers history. But also free agents like Dado Pusso, Boomsong, Alec Ray, Marvin Andrews. It was exciting compared to what was there last season. Dado Pusso obviously came from the Champions League final with Monaco. Boomsong was a young talent. Alec Ray was kind of needed as that kind of enforcer in the middle of the park. The Marvin Andrews signing I didn't get, but quickly proved me wrong. It was all about just getting a bit... McLeish, I think, deserves a lot of credit here because this is where he does kind of work and say, I need these players in. I need to fill gaps, as you say. And I think this summer's a lot more exciting.
Definitely. I think our biggest outlay was as well. I think was it Thomas Buffel.
Yeah,
I think
it was later on. Yeah,
from Feyenoord. That was in January, wasn't it? Yeah, sorry. But yeah, you know, Dado Pusso was exciting. You know, he was just off the back of the Champions League final. You know, a good kind of recognised striker. Obviously, Nacho Novo. I remember watching back when the BBC used to show the games. I remember watching the Dundee Derby a few months before when Jim, can't remember the manager's name now. Jim Duffy was manager of Dundee at the time, and Nacho just run riot. Yeah. And you could see he was an absolute talent. He had the pace. He was good. He could finish a ball as well. He was kind of the all-round player. And it, you know, little did we know it was going to be the great little and large kind of strike force, which it really did prove to be. Like you say, Marvin Andrews didn't really bat an eyelid about that at the time. Obviously Alex Ray coming in, knew he was a big Rangers man, which I guess always helps. But you know, I at that point I thought, oh, maybe he's a bit over the hill now. But then of course we brought in Sotirios Kyriakos. I think we liked players with long hair at that time, didn't we?
And long names.
Yeah, but I think obviously that might have been January. No, it wasn't January, was it? No, it was.
He came in January, yeah.
Yeah, that wasn't it? But yeah, it did look like a little bit of an improvement. The Boomsong one was big. It was big news. I just always remember going, wow, French international, you know, somebody who really is a great centre back. You know, it was just great. It was good. It was looking good at that point. But at the same time, in the back of our heads, we knew that it was such a, I guess, bin fire the season before that it would take a hell of a lot to challenge the other end of the city, really.
And this is the thing with that Celtic team, right? We know how effective that Celtic team was. They're not, like Larsson left, they weren't as good as they were. Now, the problem is, and I think we forget about this because of how well this season ends, but the start of that season is horrific.
It is.
Rangers go out of the Champions League to Moscow. Really bad result against Celtic. McLeish was under a bit of pressure. after the season before, because as you said, I think the word bin fire is perfect for that, because it just turned into such a nothing season. But there was a lot more encouragement from the signings, and obviously Champions League was massive. The Maritimo game, I remember, being a massive turning point for the season, because Rangers obviously get beaten the first leg to Maritimo in Portugal. I remember the next day there was calls and notice boards and things like that for McLeish to lose his job. I remember that specifically. Do you remember that? Do you remember that?
I do. Do you know what? That season sticks so well in my mind, because I just remember, because I think we went about 8 points behind in the league, but I do remember the UEFA Cup, because I remember the Moscow game, because I remember Novo scoring and celebrating, and I was celebrating as well. I was going crazy because I thought, we're gonna get there, and then the referee had actually blown the whistle. But it was annoying. But yeah, obviously,
remember Van Love absolutely ripping
Van Love, because he went to what was that other team? What was it? That team used to wear the orange kit. They were bankrolled and were always in and out the Champions League. He went there and he tore it up there as well. Shakhtar, that's it. Yeah, he was a cracking player, Vagdalov. He was always popping up, always at different teams in Europe. But it was very frustrating. I think this was getting towards the end of the old UEFA Cup format as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was round about this time.
So there was a lot riding on that first leg to Maritimo, in a sense. But yeah, we were looking. It's just that Old Firm game, like you say, it was another defeat. That was probably our 7th or 8th defeat against them. We just looked flat. We just didn't look like we're going anywhere. Granted, it does take time to gel a side together, especially when you're bringing in, quite a lot of players. We looked good in pre-season. I remember Purcell scoring that goal against Fulham. We all remember that one, don't we? But yeah, it was frustrating at that point, and we kind of thought, "Ooh, are they going to pull away again?"
The two turn, obviously the penalty shootout win over Maritimo, I think was a big turning point, but I think it was a big turning point as well. The League Cup game against Aberdeen away, winning 2-0. I think that the pressure eased on McLeish, because I think if obviously not winning a trophy the season before, I think just getting that bit of success in the League Cup was a massive one. But people forget in that summer, in that September, Alex McLeish could have easily lost his job. And we'll talk about him later on, obviously, when he does lose his job. And it was just a shame. It was a shame how it ended up, but I think at this point that does go under the radar, how close that was. But off the field, David Murray was back as chairman. Now, he tried to spin this in classic David Murray way, and he tried to come out and say that he had more free time in his hands, that he had sorted out, he'd taken a bit of time to revalue his businesses, and he was back to do the debt had been trimmed a wee bit. McClelland had done actually quite a good job to trim the debt, but the reason Murray was actually back was Halifax had merged with Bank of Scotland, and they wanted a bit of leadership from Murray, and Murray was going to come in and fix the mess. He was going to launch a new share issue that was going to raise £50 million with new shareholders coming in. Do you remember this? Do you remember this being talked about at the time, Murray coming back, and the BS that he provided that he was coming back because he had more free time, when actually the bank told him to come back and sort his mess out?
I remember, I think it might have been an article, maybe from, I'm not 100% sure, but I think I remember Graham Spears doing a thing about the banks, because this is the time where they were coming knocking, going, right, what's the plan? What's the date? When are we, because it's not going to last forever, is it? Especially when, debt is, kind of increasing. Again, a lot of us Rangers fans, we buried our head in the sand. Yeah. I was 15, 16. I didn't get the whole money side. I thought, we're Rangers, we're fine. But there, you could tell there was a shift. I think with Murray was always good at PR. He was always good at talking. He was always good at talking the talk, dangling signings in front of you. And then sometimes they never happened, and he wouldn't say who they were. And, he was always like that. But there was I just always remember the Boom song. The way he left just felt very weird. I don't want to say it felt like he was pushed out, because it seemed clear that he wanted to go. Out. But yeah, there was that.
That was always the plan with that deal. It was always
totally.
Again, when obviously there's a there's some legal implications here. Like, I think the statute of limitations is passed, but I don't want to be. I want to be
of course,
as careful
yeah,
as
yeah,
possible, but it's clear what that was. It was clear.
yeah.
Get him in for nothing, sell him on. But he was brilliant. I'm actually amazed his career's went the way it has. He was unbelievable in that 6 months.
It was surprising, wasn't it? Because I always remember he only had one bad game for us, and that was against Bordeaux when we played them. And it was so strange because it was against his old team, and I don't know if he just got emotionally involved in the game, or it was just a strange one. But then after that, we didn't really see him again, and then it was such a strange way of doing things. Obviously, you get players in the door, but it's not normally that quick, where turned around and then gone. I think, was it to Newcastle at the time? Was it? I think
he went to Newcastle. There's a lot of things of whether there's a lot of talk of whether it was all done together. I think we know what happened, but the problem with the share issue is that David Murray thought this would raise 50 million. It raised 1, and Murray was forced to. And this, to me, is the biggest problem with all this: is that Murray just borrowed from the bank to pay back the bank. He just borrowed money from one company to put into Rangers. It was how the financial world at the time is just remarkable. How that's a series in itself. That is, if you really want to take a deep look into that, I think there's plenty of opportunities, because there's so many just bad financial situations happening at other businesses in Scotland and around the world at the time. And obviously we know it crashes, but his relationship with the bank had went obviously a long way. He'd been very close to likes of Gavin Masterson, who would the old Dunfermline director. I was going to say dictator there. Dunfermline director who, do you remember the plan to sell Ibrox to them? Then they were going to lease it back.
There was a few things banded around. There was the sale of the name of Ibrox was banded around at the time, I remember, and there was a bit of uproar there. But yes, that kind of, I guess he maybe looked at Real Madrid and what they kind of did with the local council there, in a sense, which seems awfully dodgy, but allegedly. But yeah, there was a lot banded around of how we were going to make money. There was the casino idea. Do you remember the big super casino idea that was going to, make us lots of money? He always had this vision of, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. But again, when it comes to the logistics of these situations, it's like you have to outlay a lot of money. Yeah, it was. For me, it wasn't this season that I felt we were in a bit of trouble. It was more the season after I did. But obviously that came a bit more. But yeah, there was a lot going on. There was a lot of, especially because you imagine if Twitter was around then, it would have been unbelievable, wouldn't it?
I've got a quote. Yeah. I've got a quote here from somebody who actually knew what was going on, and we didn't know what was going on, but he had suspicions, and he was prominent in the kind of Rangers fan media at the time. And I'll just read a quote that he sent me here, and I'm not going to name him, but people will probably know who it is. Murray tried to sell Ibrox to a company which would have 6 directors, 2 from the bank, 2 from Rangers, and 2 from fan organisations, and we would lease back the ground. By this time, giving Murray more money was like buying an alky a bottle of vodka at Christmas. Now that's true. That is bang on.
I remember that quote. Yep.
That is bang on, word for word, what was going on. Murray had obviously had his money from Joe Lewis and Dave King that he had squandered. He couldn't get out of his own way. He couldn't. He was taking money, taking money from the club, taking money from the bank, but it wasn't about the long term. If you and me go and get a credit card and we squander it, now, I think with the financial situation we're in at this point, I think we go, well, wait a minute, there's a long-term problem coming here. Murray never ever thought about that. And it bothers me because there's so many businessmen, who always think about what's coming ahead. Murray never ever thought about that. It was just take, spend, and worry about it later.
I agree. I always got the impression he always thought, oh, that's not today, that's tomorrow.
Yes, I think that's exactly it.
I always think that he always thought, there's a way out. This is a football club. It's an institution. It's worth a lot of money. I think he always thought that the worst wouldn't happen. I think by
the time he thought that, would happen, he'd lost interest and was just like, nah, it'll be fine. It's
Yeah.
nothing to do with me. It will happen after I leave. And I think that's the problem. I think he always thought that something would turn up. He was a gambler. He was a gambler. He was a very successful.
And don't get me wrong, rarely it did pay off in the odd little thing.
It would pay off, yeah.
Law of averages, no, that's not how you run a business. You can't gamble everything. You know, in the 90s, he looked at us being the big European superpower, didn't he? He looked at us, you know, and he wanted that. And, you know, granted, there was the outlay for that. But then when it didn't happen, you know, you're not getting that money coming in. And obviously, this is such a... It's such a monumental season, really, isn't it? Considering, you know, what was happening at the start, you know, because this filters down to the players. When you're hearing, oh, there's little hiccups, there's this, there's that. They do start, you know, in the back of their minds thinking, oh, I know it wasn't like this at that point, but they still think, oh, am I going to get paid in a few months? Or, you know, people start thinking the worst, especially with the newspapers, you know, this is probably around the time the articles did start.
They did start around about this point. You spoke about the casino. I think that's a very interesting point because that was openly mocked at the time. That was Murray bravado. That was Murray feeding, as you say, and you spoke on it earlier, a really interesting point, feeding the bravado of, I'll give them this, I'll give the fans this to think about, this exciting thing where this carnage is going on in the background, but if I feed them this, they won't think about that and me.
Takes them off my back for about 2 weeks.
And somebody saw through it, and people saw through it. It was like, that's never happening. And it was, I don't even think it got anywhere. I remember it was Emma Dodds. It was Emma Dodds that broke the story. I remember that. She used
to write for the Rangers News, didn't she?
Yeah, she did,
yeah. To be fair, getting through Glasgow City Council, I think, would have been the biggest hurdle, let alone building the thing.
And it's not just that as well. When you're playing with people's lives as well, because you're telling everybody, I'm going to create all these jobs and all that, and people are thinking, oh, wow, this is. But it was never ever close to that. And it was just Murray bravado. It was classic. Just, I'll say what I want. Nothing will come back on me because the media don't challenge me. But that's the stage they did. And we're going later on to talk about moonbeams. And that's the real turning point.
The media did love him, and he loved being in front of them. I think he liked team biscuits with the journalists and talking about his grand plans. Yeah, and then obviously this was getting to a point where it's like, right, we want to ask the serious questions. And I don't think he liked that, really.
He didn't like being challenged, but on the park things did improve. Rangers had obviously improved. They 2 massive wins against Celtic in November. They are, when you talk about turning points, these are huge. I remember that midweek one very specifically in the League Cup. Celtic I couldn't go, I was ill. But I remember watching it at home and feeling this was because there was such a fear factor with Celtic. The one that Advocat couldn't get that gone. He couldn't get it out, the fear factor. I think Celtic had lost 7 straight games against Rangers. Had lost 7 straight games against Celtic.
Right.
That game meant something massive, not just to the fans but to the players as well. Because as you say, that fear factor, that meant we can beat Celtic, and it just filled them with confidence.
Do you know what? I remember the build up to the game because it was a midweek game, wasn't it? And I remember actually there was a lot of confidence. Because we'd started to play, you know, we started to play very well. We started to, you know, have some decent results. I think in October we smashed Aberdeen 5-0, and that was like when we started to look like, you know what, we are actually a good unit. We're very good playing. And I just remember that game because it was on BBC One, BBC One Scotland, and then because it went to extra time, I had to switch to BBC Two Scotland.
Is that right? I always remember that. Is that right?
Yeah, and I remember because I watched it with my friend John, a good friend growing up. He lived up in Milton, in Glasgow, and I went up to see him. And I just remember when I left outside, you could see over Glasgow there was lots of blue fireworks going off after the final whistle because it was a monumental win. It showed that there might be a shift in Glasgow, and it was huge getting that result. That was huge. And I remember buying the DVD in the Ranger shop in Sauchiehall Street in Glasgow. I remember 2 wins in November because it was great. And to have those kind of games so close and to still, you know, be able to win both was just phenomenal.
Yeah, Rangers had obviously turned it around in the league. They were levelling points with Celtic and getting into New Year after being 8 points behind in mid-October. There was a massive turnaround in form. And Rangers did strengthen. The boom song thing we obviously spoke about was weird, but Buffo would come in and a return for Barry Ferguson. Now there was it's a weird one because we know Barry Ferguson obviously got injured in England, but he did do pretty well. He did do pretty well the time he was there, but I think he struggled with you can draw at Blackburn and it's okay. And I think Barry Ferguson's got a bit of an ego as well. I know we speak about egos with David Murray. Barry Ferguson loved the attention Rangers gave him, and I get that. But Ferguson coming back was a big thing that January as well, because it felt like he should be here and he will help improve, and he did.
I think that's what was good about that January itself. We were looking good, and we decided to build on it. Bringing back Barry Ferguson, because the rumours only started, I think, a couple of days before, if I remember right, in my head, that he might be coming back. And then there was, I think, a picture of him spotted at Murray Park, in the papers. And I just remember, I think his first game back was it the League Cup?
It was a League Cup semi-final against Dundee United. It was 7-1.
That was it. 7-1. That was it. I just remember he chipped a ball. I can't remember who scored it, but he was just on fire that game, and it just brought back that dynamism to the midfield. Somebody was going to boss it and control it, and things were just looking so exciting at that point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Barry coming back was big for Rangers. He was Rangers.
Yeah, and as well as that, as you say, the Rangers go on a really good unbeaten run heading into that Old Firm game at Parkhead in February. That was McLeish's first Old Firm win at Celtic Park. It was the first one at Celtic Park since 2000, which I find remarkable. And that's true, because I remember, I think that was the first one I remember Rangers winning at Parkhead. But the problem with that, not the problem, but that was massive. And you remember, obviously, McLeish doing the interview and they're singing in the dressing room and things like that. It felt big, and there's so many big points in this season, but I think this is the big one. This is the one where Rangers really say, we can beat Celtic, we can take this title back, and this is the one they needed, and this is the one, obviously, they got. Terrific result for Rangers.
Totally correct. I remember the stats at the time, because I think that was the season that Celtic gave up their complete unbeaten record in every competition for about, was it 5 or 6 years? I think even Barca couldn't go there and win. And it was quite a monumental, I guess, achievement. And, you don't lose in any competition. And I think Aberdeen undone them, I think, one midweek. And then us winning there, that's a huge thing, because, you can count on the palm of your hand how many times you've won it at Parkhead, can't you? I always remember Rab Douglas, I think, was in goal. I think he had an absolute nightmare that day. I remember Vignal just scoring.
Drops the Vignal one, yeah.
Oh, it was great. It was just a great game, and obviously Novo's chip, fantastic. And it was psychologically, that was laying down the marker. That was, we can go on and win this now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and one big player that season was Fernando Rexen. He has his best season for Rangers, and it's in midfield. And we think about Fernando Rexen as a complete warrior. Fernando Rexen had an unbelievable season that season in the midfield, and it just, you look back when with so much fondness, and this is why for me he was just so good when he moved into midfield. He was allowed time in the ball. He was allowed to be a proper, didn't need to worry about defending, which wasn't his strong point, but in the midfield he's just so good. And obviously the partnership with Ferguson later on was just breathtaking.
It had to be one of the best midfields in those years, probably in about 5 years. It was fantastic, because obviously, Rexen started as it was left back, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And he was more focused on the wings, but he was very good with the ball. He was very good at dictating play. Obviously played differently to Ferguson, but he could drive forward a little bit more, which was great, because he had that in his locker. Everything was starting to click, and sometimes you just need as well a little bit of luck here and there, but everything was working. Excuse me. Yeah, it was great. It was a great time. Excuse me.
That whole, obviously the League Cup was won, 5-1 win over Motherwell. That was another really impressive performance. The league was becoming neck and neck. Celtic had obviously been heavily relying on their new loan signing Craig Bellamy, who I think had dragged them towards the title, like going towards the title. Obviously that win at Ibrox in the last Old Firm game, it meant it was all Celtic getting into the final day. Celtic were clear. Celtic were 2 points clear. All they needed was a win, and they would win the league if they beat Motherwell at Fir Park. Rangers were obviously Easter Road. What was the memories getting into that day?
Well, I remember the whole day vividly. I remember the morning where I grew up. There was people queuing outside the off license. A lot of Celtic fans, they had it in the bag. They thought, understandably so. We played Motherwell the week before. We'd won 4-1. There was nothing about Motherwell that season. Obviously, we scudded them in the League Cup final as well. And now I didn't have Setanta Sports. My mate didn't have Setanta Sports, so this is a wee bit different. So we listened to it on the radio, which actually I think provided amazing commentary. So I went up. I was a bit late. I got the bus a bit late going to my mates in Milton. Got there, and Celtic had just taken the lead.
Sutton scored, I think it was after 5 minutes.
Yeah, and it was like, oh no, well, there's any hope gone. We had the harder game, that was the season that
Hibs were going
Hibs
for Europe,
really,
I think,
yeah. Hibs were a really good side that year. They're a very young side, Scott Brown, obviously, and they were a very good team. We were still drawing 0-0. Comes to the second half, we take the lead. Okay, we're doing what we can. But I remember those last 2 minutes because we were sitting in his room because I was about 15, 16 at the time. He was about the same. And I just remember, ball forward to McDonald, and you just went, what was just happening? I could not work it out. I was like, they've scored. We were jumping up, we were going absolutely mental because we just thought, they've scored. Then, as we ran down the hallway, because his dad had burst out the living room, going, "Oh, they've scored!" We heard, and it's gone in, and we went, "Oh, they've run up the other end and scored." Of course they have, because that's what they did. They lived on 92nd minute goals, and when they said McDonald again, we just thought, no, how is this even happening? Now, next door to my mate lived a Celtic fan. And he was in his 30s. His partner was a Rangers fan. And they just had a young kid at the time, but he was just a horrible guy. We were a couple of teenagers who go, "You're Rangers fans, you're this, you're that," and he was always a bit of one of them, And I just always remember him kicking his front door out and just left. He walked out, left. We went, "What the hell is that?" We opened his front door out into the close, and his missus was at the door going, "They've just scored, Motherwell, it's 2-1, come in, lads, I got Satan, I've got to go." So she didn't care that he just kicked the door in and went. And to be fair, yeah, he was quiet for a few weeks after that, but it was just the memories. I just remember just the elation. It was the sheer, how have we made a better helicopter Sunday than the one before? It was just in world football. It's just, that the probably thing that comes close is the English Premiership. And was it 89?
Yeah.
Arsenal. It was just, there's nothing that's come close to that. And Motherwell, no disrespect to them, had nothing about them. They were getting pummeled in that game. Celtic were really knocking the door down, and it was a couple of long balls essentially. And Scott McDonald, he became a bit of a Rangers, one of the Rangers fans' favourite men for a while. He was at a lot of the RSCs as well, I remember.
Yeah, I remember, obviously, I was only about 9 or 10 at the time, and my wee twin brother and sister had just been born on the 4th of May, and this was the 21st or something, so we were it was quite hectic at the time, and my mum had taken my wee brother and sister to my other wee brother's birthday party, so it was just me and my dad and a couple of neighbours had come over to watch it, as we often did. I think we were the only people in the street with Setanta, so we had kind of gathered everybody, and we Rangers weren't they? I didn't expect Rangers to win the league, but yeah, as you say, I just remember that McDonald goal and jumping on my dad and just the unbelievable day of it. But I remember my dad phoning my mum to say, "You need to come home, we're going to Ibrox." And we went to Ibrox that night, and it was just unbelievable. As you say, just an unbelievable day. We'll get comments as well. Just tell us what your memories of that day were, because it was just such an unbelievable day. Not one you can really look back and it's one of those days you'll never ever forget, because it was just so just out the ordinary, and it was just unbelievable. But to win that league, how big was that for McLeish? Because he'd obviously in September he was probably, if you'd said he was going to be there in May, I think a lot of people would have said he might not be. But to go and win the league from there in the most dramatic of circumstances, how massive was that?
Absolutely huge. Absolutely huge. I think what was good was the fact we won the League Cup. That always seemed to
Yeah,
spur us on a little bit, didn't it? Around it was March back then, wasn't it? But for McLeish to put that side together, in that summer where we'd won nothing, we were pushing people out the door. There was mayhem upstairs. And for him to kind of go, look, we need to spend, we need to get players in. And to be fair, he didn't exactly blow lots of money. He was very clever with the signings. I think Buffon was probably the biggest financial outlay. But it was just it was I think it's bigger than we realize sometimes, because especially you look at Rangers of recent years. It's very hard to get out of that rut psychologically, especially losing every Old Firm game. That just doesn't happen. The old whitewash never happens. You at least win one or draw one or something. But to turn that around, and it was just brilliant. Especially with this was an indication as well from the other end of the city that their side now was starting to age.
yeah, and he
It was a
obviously
very
leaves.
it was a very successful side, and it done so well. They've beaten so many big teams in Europe, but it was now, especially with Larson going, it was a big change over there.
Yeah, and as you say, Anil leaves Celtic, Gordon Strachan comes in. There was a feeling in the media that Celtic were in the downturn and Rangers were on the ascendancy. That would turn out to be complete nonsense, because the days of free spending was over. Again, McLeish couldn't build on his success. He couldn't go and improve the team that had just won the title again. It's just it's annoying to even look at, because you look at just how good that season was, and you look at, he'd obviously turned the 50 million into equity. So the situation financially seemed to have calmed down. The debt wasn't as high, but it was always, as you say, one move away from chaos. This summer is another bizarre one, because there's some signings here. Brahim Hamdani makes a lot of sense. Ian Murray makes a lot of sense. Jose Carol Pierre Fan, Oliver Bernard. He'd obviously offloaded players like Ball and Arveladze. Decent wage earners, so obviously that was the plan. But I want to bring your attention to one signing, if you remember. Do you remember the name Filippo Maniero?
Maniero, was this
Right.
the I'll play if you need me?
Yeah.
Maniero, what a bizarre
You
way
sign a
of
player.
doing
Now you
it.
sign a player from Italy, right? Fair enough. Serie A experience. Rangers had tried to sign him before. Decent Italian striker back in the day. Rangers had signed Filippo Maniero and told him, you don't have to move to Ibrox. What you can do is you can stay in Italy, train with your local team, and if we need you, we'll send a plane for you on Friday to play the Saturday.
Madness.
Madness.
Absolute madness.
What on earth is that? How on earth is nobody? That's my, and this isn't just David Murray that deserves the blame for this. This is the whole Rangers board, because somebody must have looked at that and went to, and David, that wouldn't have mattered because David Murray did what David Murray wanted. But all somebody had to say, somebody must have said, what are you doing? What is this all? Why?
It was weird at the time because you heard the name and go, oh,
He's a
wow,
decent
okay.
player, a very decent
Yeah, you
player.
go, right, okay. And then you're like, oh, okay. And the fact that, because wasn't it terminated very early on?
It
As
did
well,
I think it lasted. I think he played one friendly against Clyde. I
Oh
think.
my God. Yeah. Absolute madness. It's how the fact is, when you're training with other teams, you don't get into the system, you don't get into the tactics. It just doesn't, that whole idea. There must have been some sort of amazing deal for us, just for Murray to be able to go, you know what, I just want to announce a huge signing.
And that's what it was. It was just like, oh, he was a good player back in the day. It was the Egg of Lostenstad thing. Like, yeah, he was a decent player. Let's just announce him and it'll make fans happy. No, and it didn't. And the bank were obviously, the bank are involved at this point, and they're kind of running telling Murray what to do. Murray's kind of get two hands behind his back, but it's his own fault. Martin Bain seems to make a bit of a progression at this point. He'd obviously became chief executive around 2005. He's an interesting one, because I think he was obviously a Murray, not a Murray puppet, that's maybe harsh, but he was certainly from the Murray cloth of not really having to care about what the fans wanted. Now, you know as well as I do, when you run a when you're a football fan, you need to know that the company's been run well, the club's been run well, because you're not meant to care about the balance sheet, but as long as you know there's people in there who have the best interest for the fans. And I think, as much as I think that the current Rangers board can I make mistakes and don't usually they'll make some big errors. What they know is that what the fans have been through recently, they have the best interest of the club at heart. And Bain, I think, suffered from that, because Bain saw himself as Murray's protege, where I don't think Murray saw him as that. But Bain had obviously think, I'll just be the same. I'll just be the same character. And that's the problem. That was Bain's problem. He was just very much cut from the David Murray cloth.
Didn't he get a cryo chamber put in it? Was it Howie?
No, it was Sunderland. He didn't do that. Yeah, he didn't do that at Ibrox, luckily, but he managed to do it in Sunderland. And he's become a bit of a caricature, but he was very much promoted by Murray to kind of do Murray's day-to-day work. Now, he was obviously a commercial director. I think he'd actually done pretty well in his time like that. But later on, when he needs the fans, when he's trying to warn them about Big Bad Craig White, he can't get through to them, and it's because of this. It's because of this time, because he just didn't. He treated the fans with contempt. It wasn't. He would famously not promote. He would bring in people who supported Celtic. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, he didn't like people that supported the club. He
didn't like people telling him the right thing to do.
Yeah,
and that's David Murray as well. David Murray didn't like that, and Bain obviously was cut from that cloth. He wouldn't get. It was tough, because I think we look at Bain badly now because of that, but I think he was trying too much to be. He was trying too much to be Gordon Gekko, the kind of protege to Gordon Gekko. That's what it was like. It was like, yeah, just do everything this guy does, and I'll be loved the same way he is. It's not the same.
Do you know what? I do remember his reasoning for having Celtic fans over Rangers fans was they won't bother the players.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make sense. You know, if you're hiring somebody that's a fan of the club, they've got the club's interests at heart, more so maybe than somebody off the street. Yeah, I know where you're coming from. I think he thought he saw himself as maybe potentially a Murray replacement in the future. He's still obviously still in football. He obviously was down at Sunderland. I don't know if he's still there.
He's now what I found out, he's now something to do with the Indian Super League.
Oh, is he?
Yeah.
Okay. There's a lot of money out there in that respect.
But I think, I think it gets tarnished with the Murray brush in a way. I think he's
as a collective, I think he does.
I think he does. And I think if you spoke to Martin Bain now, I think he would be. Now, obviously, we know he's became a bit of a kind of comic figure for his Sunderland antics, but just not listen to the fans, because I get the whole thing that fans can't always be right, and I get that, but you need to, if you're gonna then need the fans later on, which is what he needed, you need to give them something. You can't just be this guy in a suit who just tells them, don't do this, don't do that. You're not going to get anywhere. And it's very, very rare that people last unless they're brilliant at running the club, and you can see what they're doing. But again, what was the real improvements at the time? I mean, you're seeing the likes of Olivia Bernard, you're seeing the squad going backwards, and Bain, obviously his position's becoming higher. So what's the balance there? Where are you going? Like, Martin Bain's coming up, but what is he actually doing good for the club where fans will get on his side? And that was his problem. That's what he suffered from. I
totally agree, because it always felt like there was a lot of it seemed like a lot of arguments and debates between fan groups and either him or, because I think for a while, because it always used to be more David Murray people that fan groups used to deal with, but then it started to become Bain a bit more. Yeah. Like, I think it just probably because Murray was just like, I just can't be bothered.
Yeah.
I think that's just what it became at one point. But yeah, this, like you say, Olivia Bernard, how crazy is that to think that Olivia Bernard was in this team, you know, weighed probably about 15 stone and took us was it to the last 16 of the Champions League?
You mentioned there about the last 16 of the Champions League, and we'll just kind of do it in a one-up, because there's so much going on this season. The reaching the last 16 with a team like this is mind blowing. absolutely mind-blowing how they managed to do it. It wasn't a spectacle of football, but they got the results. They obviously beat Porto. I think they only lost one game. I think they only lost into Milan. I think was the only loss.
The one where Lovenkrands missed the sitter. That's right. Yeah.
Like some achievement to do, and we'll obviously touch on it with we'll go into kind of further detail with it with the written piece, but that was some achievement, wasn't it?
It was, because it's not as if we just had a lucky draw. To have Inter Milan in that group with Porto, it's you got really no right to finish third. Rangers have always, up to this point, underperformed in Europe. We always have. The 90s, bar 92, 93, we were atrocious in Europe. The amount of, you hear the word grasshoppers and you shudder instantly.
Mm-hmm.
And despite the money that was pumped into the club then, we could never achieve this. And we done it at a time where we were relying on players like Francis Jeffers at times. It's just unbelievable. It's definitely up there with winning the league the season before, in that kind of bizarre. It's just a strange one because it really did keep McLeish in a job.
Yeah, it did. I mean, and it actually does, and that's you made a terrific point there. Rangers domestically are atrocious that season. Now, the famous run in October to December where Rangers go 10 games without a win, 17 points behind Celtic in their 5th place in the league. Now, I don't care how well you do in Europe, you do not last if that's your remit. No, even Pedro Caixinha and Mark Warburton didn't get as bad as that. Now, I think Alex McLeish is a very underrated Rangers manager, but domestic form like that, and as you say, can you imagine Twitter now? Can you imagine Twitter then? Do you know what I mean?
I think as well, considering when you look to what was happening across the city with Strachan coming in and the players that they were signing, they weren't players that were replacements for Larsson, replacements, for Sutton Thompson and all this. You looked at it and thought, well, we've got a chance here.
We've got a chance. As you say, it wasn't like Celtic were going out and signing huge players. I mean, it was Magic Żurawski, Nakamura, Boric. So there weren't a lot of players people have heard of. They obviously went on to be really good signings, but it wasn't setting the world on fire. Like, it wasn't like... But David Murray does what David Murray does. Instead of properly kind of stepping in and being decisive, he tells Chick Young in the BBC, now I want to kind of get your thoughts on this. During that run, Alex McLeish's position would be reviewed after 5 games. He would have 5 games to save his job. Rangers didn't win any of them. Now, a lot of people were thinking McLeish would be showing the door. And Murray comes out and says that McLeish is staying. What's your memories of that?
I remember, it seemed to be every few weeks that he would come out and go, we're going to review it after the next few games, And yeah, it was a strange one because I think, it was almost set in stone. We'll review it after 5 games. And the 5 games were atrocious. And the fact he said he was staying on, I don't know if it's because he thought he didn't want to pay McLeish off at that point. I think maybe it was a strange one because there was a few times that season that he did say, we'll review it. Obviously, as well, famously, we had Hearts were essentially doing bits, weren't they?
Always worked wonders at Hearts in his early days before he was sacked, yeah.
And we were languishing at this point, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, at times.
Rangers was 5th in late November. Do you know what I mean? Like,
that doesn't happen.
No, it doesn't happen. And Murray again, and you said there about obviously McLeish. He kept saying we'll review the situation. After that last review where he said we'll review it after 5 games and Rangers didn't win any of them, he comes out with this thing and it's a shtick, and that's what it is. He comes out and says that I looked into Alex's eyes and realised I couldn't sack him before the the last 16 tie against Villarreal. See if Murray had said that instead of saying we'll review the situation. If he'd come out and said when the kind of pressure was mounting, they'd come out and said, McLeish, Alex will be leaving at the end of the season, but he deserves the chance to lead Rangers out in the last 16 because it was an unbelievable achievement. Rangers never finished. Rangers never got to the last 16, so he did deserve that chance to lead Rangers out because he took them there. But instead, you get this nonsense of, We'll review it after 5 games. Rangers don't improve in the 5 games, so people are expecting McLeish to be gone. And instead, he just feeds off this nonsense and just makes things difficult for himself. And McLeish, what's McLeish thinking as well? He's got 5 games to sit. McLeish is thinking his days are over. McLeish can't be sitting there after the 5 games and going, do you know what? I'm definitely staying here. Unless he'd been told by Murray, I've just said that just to shut everybody up for a couple of weeks.
That's true. Yeah, we've got to remember managers are human as well, haven't we?
Yeah.
When you're in a job and, it's very publicly being told via the press that it's going to be reviewed, and then doesn't exactly, and then, yeah, it's not good for you working. When you're trying to motivate a team, your teammates, well, your players are thinking you're going to be out the door in 5 minutes. It was just such a weird time. This season, I think, really did kind of solidify that, there needs to be a change. I don't think McLeish really did a lot wrong. I think he was very hamstrung.
I think he was hamstrung, and I think that's why a lot of people have kind of calmed down on it now, because I think he was working with shoestring, but he was working with his team sold out from under him not once but twice. So he had that thing in his locker of I'm not working with the team I had. So he had that kind of excuse. But there is a common theory with this that George Burley, you mentioned that Hearts had worked wonders. He'd obviously been sacked after the fallout with Romanoff. Murray had him lined up. Something put Murray off Burley. Now we can speculate what that was, and it's not for me or anybody to. That's between everybody involved. But something changed, and Murray had backed himself into a corner where he had to get it out with the classic David Murray BS.
I agree. Again, we talk about bin fires. There was a mini bin fire brewing at Tynecastle, wasn't there? Despite, a 100% record, it was absolutely insane. I think everyone was looking at Hearts very closely that year. And George Burley had done a fantastic job. But it seemed that he may have said the wrong thing to the owner, and then that was it. He looked like he might have been a very good replacement at that point. Somebody that knows the league very well. But again, what happened? It was just such a,
and something
we're kind of used to it.
Yeah, something definitely put him off, because even in the summer when he's looking for a manager, Burley's not even mentioned. So there's something changed there, because he had Burley lined up. I think he'd even got to the point where they were negotiating personal terms, and something happened. But as we say, you're giving McLeish knows his days are numbered, so he's got this Villarreal game, and then the season's a complete write-off. So they spend 400,000 Chris Boyd. We know what Chris Boyd goes on to do. Results do improve, but the writing's on the wall for McLeish after the 3-0 defeat at home to Hibs at Ibrox in the Scottish Cup, where he plays this 4-2-4 thing. And I still to this day don't understand what he was doing, but he did it again at Aberdeen, and then they lose again. And that was it. 18 points behind Celtic, 8 points behind Hearts in second. The following day, Murray announced that Alex would be leaving. It just went so badly wrong. And Murray was always hesitant to sack managers. Famously, he says Smith's going at the end of the season, when in reality he told him that. He didn't just he makes up the phantom job for Dick Advocat about moving upstairs. I think Murray deserves a bit of credit here, because at least he gave him the courtesy of leading. He stuck to his word about leading them out for the Champions League game. Now, David Murray is not getting much praise in this show, but McLeish deserved that opportunity. He'd worked wonders in that European run to lead Rangers through, and obviously that Villarreal game, Rangers are so close to getting through. It comes, Chris Boyd puts that chance away.
He fresh aired it, didn't he?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I'm coughing. Oh, apologies. I remember that. Yeah, that one big. If you're in business, you've got to make big calls. You've got to be able to stand up and sack someone. Nobody likes sacking people. You're putting a human being out of a job. But Murray was never good at that. And I guess that's where you saw the human side to him a little bit, rather than just this PR figure. But when you've got a board, because I'm sure the boards were probably going, why is this still going on? Why is this still? Yes, he stuck to his word in the end. Give McLeish to the Champions League, but that Villarreal tie, considering we didn't exactly throw it away at Ibrox. It was a good game.
It was a good game. Rangers gave as good as they got, and I remember Riquelme being outstanding in that game. And do you know what I mean? It's just, you're playing against teams like that and you hold your own and come within so close of getting there. But that Villarreal away leg was a turning point for the club in terms of obviously the incident with the sectarian songs, with the Billy Boys. Now, we both agree, and we'll both agree that sectarian singing should never, ever be happening. It should be,
Correct.
we both agree, it should be wiped off the face of the earth. Rangers deserved the fine, they did, and it was caught on camera. Prominent members of the media in Scotland, and there's a couple obviously that we've mentioned in this show already, including senior politicians, had sent evidence to UEFA that was to get this fine through. Now, this is so tough to touch on because you're worried you might say the wrong thing and things like that.
Of course, yeah.
But David Murray fed the fans to the wolves in that regard. What Murray should have come out and said was, we understand the sectarian singing's wrong. We will work with the fans. We'll get this thing through. We'll get the Follow with Pride thing through. We'll get everything sorted. No, if he just let it happen. He just let the fact that the likes of Spears and who was the guy? Was it Finn Barrow Brannigan or whatever his name was? Do you remember that? Like that thing, like that whole nonsense. And that was, again, it's just you're feeding these people who just want to hurt Rangers. And Rangers had obviously, the sectarian singing could never be excused, and I totally agree with that. But Murray he wasn't proactive. He allowed the fans to be hounded by members of the media. And it's always been perceived that it's a one-team problem. It isn't. Both Rangers and Celtic fans are guilty of it. Absolutely
totally
guilty
agree.
of it. But Murray just didn't. It was, don't say anything bad about me. You can attack the fans all you want, but leave me out of it. And that's exactly what happens here.
I totally agree. This was a big turning point. I think a lot of the laws were changing, weren't they? And things were being stamped out, and understandably so. We're in the 21st century. Things shouldn't be, things shouldn't be said. Very offensive sectarian things. But it is a two-way street, and the fact that the press really got hold of this and really demonized all Rangers fans. It seemed to be a collective.
And it was that thing as well. Yeah, it was like demonising the whole support, and that's the bit I think I throw Murray at. It was like, if you're a Rangers fan, you're a sectarian bigot, and that's not true.
No, not at all.
There is a small portion that are, and I don't think you'll ever change that. But to not come out and stick up for the fans that aren't the fans like me and you that go to every game and were on our best behaviour. And
I totally agree, because I remember going to a game. I think it was this season. I think it was the game where we played. Was it Dunfermline? Maybe it was the season before. No, it was this one. It was Dunfermline in March. We won 1-0. It wasn't a great game. But when I was in the crowd, because I was in the club deck, and I did hear Billy Boys was starting. But then within like a minute, you could hear booing, drowned it out, then it stopped. And that was it for the whole game. That was it.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but you could hear more booing than singing at that point.
It was, Murray was worried about the loss of income that stadium closures would bring if it carried on, but it didn't. The supporters groups, like the supporters trust and things like that, they deserve so much credit for this, because they got that through. They did help and get that through, and I think they kind of stuck up for the fans a wee bit, because Murray had opened the gates for the fans to be hounded. As you say, you pointed out there, if you were a Rangers fan who was on their best behaviour, you were put in the same bracket, and that's never ever been taken away. That's never ever been properly halted because of Murray. Murray let that happen. Let that happen, and you've got people there who want to hurt, and that's the problem.
I totally agree. I live in England. I've spoke to a few people before. What team do you support? Oh, Rangers. Oh, you're one of them bigots then. And it's that kind of, it's a label, and it's a label that Rangers fans have been given. And we have campaigns in the club now, everyone, anyone. And
that's obviously a follow up on that, and that's obviously but you've still got this thing of, is enough being done, and that was my issue with that time, is that Rangers deserved the punishment they got, and the Billy Boys should never be sung. I hope I never hear songs like it again. But you're making it all about Rangers when it isn't. You're making that's the issue here, and Murray let it happen because he didn't want himself to be involved in that. Feed the fans to the wolves, and that's the thing about the disconnect between the fans and the owners. You need that balance. You can't do that if you want to be a successful owner. So Murray deserves a lot of blame for that. The Rangers fans, I think, have been a lot better in terms of, I think a lot of it's been eradicated. You still hear it here and there, but you hear it at Celtic games as well. So it's not a one club issue, but you need your owner to be more supportive for the fans. He could have easily come out and said, this is a minority issue, we will eradicate it. Instead, he just let the media go after them, and I think that's unforgivable if you ask me. But we'll close up the show. The third place finish in the league, it ends badly for McLeish. Obviously, it was a nice send off because he'd obviously, I think a lot of people respect McLeish for what he did. The trophies he had won. It's the same as Advocaat. I think there's two halves of it. I think the first part is brilliant. The second half is not brilliant, and I think it's that thing. What outweighs the other?
I agree. It was it really was a seesaw, wasn't it? You know, McLeish, when he came to Rangers, came in at kind of difficult time, a transitional period. Got something out of us. Then obviously the treble season, fantastic. You know, you can name on one hand how many managers have won a treble, but to go from that to then nothing, to then the last 16. Champions League, and then winning it on the final day again, 2 helicopter Sundays when the pressure's on. McLeish was a very good manager. He proved that when he went to Birmingham.
And Scotland, his first spell at Scotland.
And Scotland, yes, I
completely
agree. I think he was thrown under the bus a little bit on the second spell, but there was a lot more problems there at the time. It's always have a fondness for Alex McLeish. I do think he's a good man, a good manager. It's just a shame the way it ended, but any manager, I guess, leaving a club never ends well, does it?
No, it doesn't, and it's one of those things. I think McLeish, I think a lot of people view him as a successful manager with a lot of unsuccessful times, but it was a fascinating period in Rangers history. On the next part of the Rangers journey, we will look at the short-lived spell of Paul Le Guen. What happens when Rangers go to the European market again? Murray takes part in a project, entices Paul Le Guen to Ibrox, and as we know, it doesn't end well. But for this part of the Rangers journey, I want to thank Andrew Simpson for joining me. Andrew, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
It's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you very much to everyone that's tuned in, and please join us on the next part of the Rangers journey.